In July 2022, 4 European bison were released into an English woodland near Canterbury, the first wild bison in Britain for 6,000 years. A bull joined the 3 females a few months later, but the females did not wait. Within hours, the matriarch charged straight into a thicket of rhododendron and ripped it out with her head. Then she turned to the nearest willow and tore long vertical strips of bark away in deep gouges, exposing the pale wood like a surgical cut. Right beside her, the younger females dropped to the ground and began rolling violently, churning the soil into shallow pits with their powerful hooves and shoulders, bare earth that had not seen daylight in decades. No one told them to do any of this. Within weeks, the bison had trampled brambles and opened corridors through woodland so dense that light had not reached the forest floor in decades. Dung beetle larvae appeared in their droppings so quickly that one ranger asked how the beetles got the memo. Fungi began growing from the dung within days. The woodland was responding to an animal it had not seen since the Stone Age, as if it had been waiting. And what they did to that forest in a matter of weeks accomplished more than years of human management had achieved with chainsaws and heavy machinery. This is the story of an animal that was hunted to total extinction in the wild, reduced to 12 survivors in zoos, and how its return to an English woodland is forcing conservationists to rethink everything they assumed about how forests should be managed. To understand why 4 bison matter to a 560-hectare woodland in Kent, you first have to understand what is wrong with that woodland. And the problem is not what most people expect. Walk into a British ancient woodland and it looks healthy. The canopy is thick, the trees are tall, the ground is carpeted in leaf litter. The phrase itself, ancient woodland, suggests something precious and intact. But that impression is a lie told by the canopy. Underneath, these forests are dying. Decades of commercial management, followed by decades of neglect, have sealed the canopy shut. No light reaches the ground. The flowering plants, shrubs, and grasses that once created a layered, living understory have vanished. Without those plants, the specialist insects disappear. Without the insects, the birds and bats follow. What remains is a green shell, impressive from a distance, hollow at its core. West Blean and Thorndon Woods sits near Canterbury in Kent. At 560 hectares, it is part of the largest continuous block of ancient woodland in southern England. Kent Wildlife Trust had been managing it conventionally for years, coppicing, cutting, clearing, with limited results. Before the trust bought the woodland, half of it had been planted with commercial non-native conifers for timber production. The other half was dense, overgrown, and stagnant. Baseline surveys before the bison arrived revealed extraordinary hidden richness buried under the neglect. 178 species of spider, including a critically rare species not recorded in Britain since 2004. A rare fungus beetle not seen in the UK since 1988. Nightingales. Lesser spotted woodpeckers. The diversity was there, clinging on in fragments. But the physical architecture needed to sustain it was falling apart. The conventional tools all work for a while. Coppice a section and light floods in. Cut back the undergrowth and ground flora returns. But stop the work for even a few years and the canopy seals shut again. No conservation budget can sustain that cycle across hundreds of hectares indefinitely. The woodland needed something that works around the clock, year after year, without a salary or a management review. Enter the European bison. The European bison is the largest land animal native to Europe. Adult males can weigh close to 900 kilograms. Built for forest environments, they are distinctly different from the open grassland American bison most people picture when they hear the word. Their ancestors shaped European forests for hundreds of thousands of years. Their absence left a gap that nothing else filled, and their story of survival is almost impossible to believe. Hunting and habitat loss eliminated European bison progressively across the continent over centuries. During World War I, occupying German soldiers slaughtered 600 bison in Poland's Białowieża forest for sport and meat. By 1919, the last wild bison in Poland had been killed. In 1927, the last wild European bison on Earth was shot by a poacher in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia. The species was extinct in the wild. Every forest on the continent that had evolved with these animals was suddenly, permanently, without them. But the European bison was not entirely gone. 54 individuals survived in European zoos, and every single one of them could be traced back to just 12 founding animals. 12. That is the genetic bottleneck through which an entire species had to pass. From those 12, conservationists began the most meticulous breeding program in the history of wildlife conservation. Every individual was documented, every lineage tracked. The European Bison Pedigree Book, first published in 1932, has recorded every living bison every year since. In 1952, the first captive-bred bison were released back into the wild in Poland's Białowieża forest. Over the following decades, reintroduction programs expanded across Poland, Romania, Germany, the Netherlands, and beyond. From 12 zoo animals in 1927, the population has grown to approximately 7,000 free-roaming bison across Europe today. A recovery from the edge of oblivion that took nearly a century. In Britain, they had been absent for approximately 6,000 years. No living ecosystem in England had any memory of them, until July 2022. The Wilder Blean project, a partnership between Kent Wildlife Trust and Wildwood Trust, released the founding herd into a fenced section of the woodland. 3 females arrived first in July, the matriarch, an 18-year-old from Scotland, and 2 younger females from Ireland. The bull followed from Germany in December, delayed by months of post-Brexit animal import paperwork. His bloodline traces directly back to the founding 12 animals that saved the species from extinction. The framing of this decision matters. The bison were not brought to Kent because bison needed saving in England. They were brought because the woodland needed saving, and bison were identified as the most effective tool available for the specific ecological work required. The bison are not the beneficiaries of this project. They are the mechanism. No supplementary feeding. No directed management beyond basic veterinary care. The animals behave as wild animals. The woodland changes around them. What makes European bison unique among large herbivores is not their size. It is the specific combination of 4 behaviors they bring to a woodland, all operating simultaneously, each producing a different ecological outcome. The first is bark stripping. Bison strip bark from living trees in long vertical gouges, eventually ring-barking individual trees and killing them. A dead standing tree, called a snag, is among the most ecologically valuable structures a woodland can contain. Over 2,000 species of beetle, bird, bat, and fungus depend on dead wood habitat at various stages of decay. Snags take decades to develop naturally. A bison produces one in a single season. The second is tree knockdown. Bison use their body weight, close to a ton in adult males, to push over trees, creating fallen deadwood on the forest floor and opening gaps in the canopy above. Light reaches the ground. Ground flora begins establishing in that gap within a single growing season. Knockdown creates space and new opportunity for plants and animals. The third is wallowing. Bison dig shallow depressions in the soil by rolling and churning with their bodies, producing bare earth patches across the woodland floor. Bare earth in a vegetation-covered woodland is critical habitat for specialist insects and plants that cannot establish in closed ground cover. Each wallow is a small ecological hotspot. The fourth is selective grazing. Bison favor certain plant species over others, creating a mosaic of different vegetation types across the woodland floor rather than the uniform ground cover that develops under a closed canopy. Diversity at ground level supports diversity across every layer above it. The combined result of these 4 behaviors running continuously across hundreds of hectares is what no human management program has ever replicated. It cannot be purchased, It cannot be scheduled. It has to be lived into existence by an animal that evolved to produce it. The results at West Blean arrived faster than anyone predicted. Within weeks of release, the matriarch was tearing out rhododendron, a behavior no management plan had anticipated. Corridors opened through the woodland. Light reached the forest floor for the first time in decades. Dung beetle larvae appeared in the bison droppings within weeks. Bark-stripped trees began their transformation into the dead wood habitat that supports thousands of species. The monitoring program, one of the largest of its kind in the UK and running until 2050, documented measurable changes in the first year. Slow worm counts rose from 36 in 2021 to 58 in 2023. Grass snake sightings quadrupled. Plant species not previously recorded in those sections of the woodland began appearing in grazed and disturbed areas, species that require direct light or open soil and that had found no pathway to establish under the sealed canopy. Then the herd began to grow. In September 2022, just 2 months after the females arrived, the matriarch gave birth to the first bison calf born in British woodland in thousands of years. By late 2023, a second calf arrived, the first to be conceived and born entirely in the woodland. A third followed in the summer of 2024. The founding four had become a growing herd. But the project is not without controversy. And the tension is not about the bison themselves. It is about what they represent in a country with no genuine wilderness left. Britain is not Eastern Europe. Every acre is owned, managed, and adjacent to human activity. The bison do not produce a tidy woodland. They produce a messy, broken-looking woodland with fallen trees, stripped bark, churned soil, and open gaps where there used to be a continuous canopy. This directly conflicts with a deeply rooted British cultural assumption that managed land should look managed, and that nature properly handled should be visually orderly. Dangerous wild animal legislation means the bison cannot share the same space as the public. With footpaths crisscrossing the woodland, Kent Wildlife Trust had to build bison bridges, structures that allow the animals to pass underneath while visitors walk overhead. Any expansion beyond fenced sites raises serious questions about land ownership, liability, and public safety near animals that can weigh close to a ton. The ecological argument on the other side is straightforward. The cost of conventional woodland management is rising. The results of that management are not keeping pace with the ecological decline of the habitats it is meant to protect. Bison deliver results. The alternative cannot match, at a speed human intervention cannot replicate, and they do it continuously, without being directed, without being paid, without needing a management plan updated every 5 years. Neither side of this argument wins cleanly. The project continues, the debate continues around it, and the woodland, quietly, continues to change. The recovery of the European bison from 12 zoo animals to 7,000 wild individuals is one of the most significant conservation achievements of the 20th century. It took nearly 100 years, and in July 2022, that century-long recovery arc reached an English woodland near Canterbury. The trees being stripped and knocked over right now will become snags and deadwood over the coming decades, supporting species not recorded at this site for generations. The calves being born in the woodland will grow up knowing no other landscape. They will learn where the best bark is, where the best wallowing ground sits, where the water pools after rain. They will shape the woodland the way their ancestors shaped forests across this continent for hundreds of thousands of years before humans removed them. The monitoring program runs until 2050. By then, the oldest bison born at West Blean will be approaching 30. The woodland around them will look nothing like it does today. It will look messier, more broken, more alive. What is happening in that Kent woodland is not a return to the past. It is an experiment in letting an animal do the work that humans cannot afford, cannot sustain, and cannot replicate, and discovering that the forest already knew what to do with it. The bison stripped the bark. The beetles moved into the dead wood. The light hit the ground. The seeds germinated. And an ancient woodland that had been slowly dying under its own canopy started, for the first time in centuries, to breathe. But bison are not the only species being brought back to reshape landscapes across Europe. In our next video, we look at another animal that disappeared from an entire country and what happened when it was finally allowed to return.